Blade Sorcery 1.0 is an achievement in the VR industry. There hasn't been a VR game with mechanics this good and revolutionary since Half-Life Alyx. It's been in development for over 5 years, and ever since it went into early access back in 2018, it's had the best sword and magic combat out of any VR game, and maybe even any game in general. There's a level of satisfying flexibility here that's only gotten better over time. I was able to get access to the update a little bit early, so I'm going to give you a short review of what you can expect in the full version of the game. At its core, Blade Sorcery is about using any weapon in your arsenal to take down your enemies. For the entire time it was in early access, it was a combat sandbox game and a very good sandbox. There's a massive amount of mods available from the huge modding community, and ironically, people have turned Blade Sorcery into one of the best Star Wars games. The combat physics are incredible. It feels fluid, weapons have weight and don't feel floaty. You can get extremely creative with pulling off attacks, and the game even works with full body tracking, which is my preferred way of playing. You can kick enemies with your actual feet, or kick a weapon from your foot into your hand. It's so much fun. But there has always been something missing. It was an awesome combat sandbox in early access, but it was just a sandbox. There was no real sense of progression or a larger story to this world. Well, 1.0 fixes that, and it's insane. Basically, you now have the option to create a separate character on Crystal Hunt, which is the story mode. Let's start with character creation. I was surprised to see there's a decent amount of options for making your avatar. There's different races, hairstyles, and a bunch of customization, but there's also a background class system where you can start off with certain skills like having access to slowing down time, using fire magic, electricity, and stuff like that to give you an edge in combat. As far as I know, you can unlock other skills in different classes, but you start off with nothing, so you may want to choose your background according to your playstyle. I went with mine to have access to the slow time skills. There's also different difficulty settings, like how much stuff you lose on death, how aggressive the AI is, and even a permadeath mode, which I could see as being a pretty intense and fun way to play the game. I went with normal, but I'm probably going to be cranking this up to hard or permadeath because if you do use full body tracking, you end up getting a pretty big advantage in combat. It's super fun kicking people off cliffs, but keep that in mind. There's a brand new tutorial when you start, and there's now books and notes you can find in the world to flesh out the lore. I'm not going to pretend to know everything that's going on, I'm still pretty early, but you can tell they put work into fleshing out the world here to make it interesting. There's also some voice acting, which I wasn't expecting, but it's super cool.
I've been told all about your quest for a mutual friend, Athel, and as a personal favor to him, I'm going to help you get started.
After the short tutorial, you'll find the hub and skill tree, and this has got to be the coolest VR skill tree system I've ever seen. It's 3D, it's physical, it's not a 2D menu. Other VR games need to start doing this. It's sick. So essentially what you're doing in Crystal Hunt is hunting down crystals, which you can then use on the skill tree to gain powers and abilities. And there's also tiers with more powerful abilities costing more crystals. The tier system also applies to weapons and armor, with higher end stuff costing more gold, which you'll get by completing dungeons. There's also a store where you can buy stuff. Again, it's all very physical, which is amazing. There's no 2D menu. If you want to buy or sell stuff, you physically bring it to the counter and pay for it. Even changing and equipping armor, it's a physical thing. You drag it onto your body. And there's a whole new inventory system. It's this slick glowing orb that you grab out of your stomach where you can see your items and stats. It looks amazing. The majority of what you're going to be doing is fighting in instance procedural dungeon maps, which you can access from the hub and was introduced in previous Blade Sorcery patches. But these are improved with better layouts, graphics, music, new enemies, and a bunch of different factions all fighting over these crystals. At the end of the dungeon, you'll get loot and crystals, which you can then collect to spend on abilities and weapons and make your character more powerful. It's not like this is some large open world. It would have been cool to have all these dungeons connected somehow, but I think the hub and instance areas work well for this type of game loop. I believe there's also bosses too. Again, I haven't gotten that far. I'm still fairly early into the game because it's physically tiring. This is some of the most fun I've had in VR in years, but it's a workout. And I'm also not as young as I was when I first played this in early access. I will say the AI is a bit on the easy side. It's improved from when it was in early access, and it may just be because I'm so early into the game, but I haven't had a big challenge taking down anyone. That may just be because it's such a flexible combat system and there's really no way to balance it against the player. You absolutely do feel like a badass, but don't expect Dark Souls going into this. And that's the 1.0 version of Blade Sorcery. It's fixed my biggest problem with the game and maybe yours as well. There's now a reason to play around in this awesome sandbox. Blade Sorcery is a must-play VR game. 10 out of 10. And finally, I know there's going to be some people asking if this is on Nomad. I don't work for Warp Frog. I'm assuming this will be released later in the Quest standalone. As of right now, the update is only out for PC VR. And just as a quick rant, I actually really appreciate when developers don't compromise the vision of their game for the Quest. Blade and Sorcery is pushing the industry forward in a lot of ways, and I wish more VR developers would do that instead of focusing on the platform with the most market. So many VR devs these days compromise the vision of their game as a whole so it would run on standalone, and it becomes a worse product, like Onward. Blade and Sorcery hasn't done that, and it's paying off. People love and talk about this game all the time. It's doing something that other VR games can't offer because they're too focused on optimizing for standalone. For the rest of the video, I'm going to give you guys some gameplay, but let me know what you think of Blade and Sorcery. Here we go, off on an adventure. Whoa, that's cool.
Ready.
moving there. Cheers, mate. Great. Will there be anything else?